Hi fellow roadie, welcome to the Road to Your Family History YouTube channel. Thanks for joining me. Hey, today I'm going to get you started on learning how to research your family history in the U.S. Census Records. Ooh, we're going to have a good time. Now today we're just going to talk about the background. We're not going to jump into the research, just going to give you some background about the census. We're going to do that right after this. Back, fellow roadie. Today we're going to talk about the background that you need to know before doing research on U.S. Census Records. We're going to have a good time, so let's get started. The first thing to know is that the census is done every 10 years in years ending in 0. I think most people already know that, even if they don't do genealogy or family history. So that's an easy one. But man, here's something that a lot of people don't know. The very first census was done in 1790. Yeah, back in 1790. So they've been doing a census for an awful long time. Now, of course, back in 1790, they didn't give as much information in that census that they do in the more recent censuses, but still, way back to 1790. I mean, isn't it great that we can do census research on our ancestors all the way from 1790 up to 2020? No, that's not quite the case. Let's talk about that. Now, there was a fire in 1921 in the Commerce Building in Washington, D.C. that destroyed the 1890 census. Now, at first, they thought all the census records that had been done from 1790 up to that point, they thought that all of them had been destroyed. But luckily, they discovered that it was only the 1890 census that was destroyed. Well, in the 1930s and in the 1950s, they found some small fragments of the 1890 census. So not all of it was destroyed, but the Census Bureau still says that 99.99% of that census was destroyed. So that's not something we're going to be able to look at during our research. Hey, fellow roadie, I just want to get a quick word in here. Hey, if you go down to the video description below here, if you're watching this video on YouTube, you'll see a link where if you click it, you can get a free PDF summary of what we're talking about in this video. It's a nice resource to have that you can see a hard copy of it on your screen, or you can print it out on your printer to have it handy. So take a look and download it. I hope it helps. So is there anything else that's going to affect what we can do census research in? Well, yeah, there is. There was a law that the federal government passed in, I believe it was 1978, that makes census records private for 72 years. Now, why 72 years? It seems like an odd number. Well, I think at that time, that's what the life expectancy was for the typical American citizen. So they chose 72 years. So what does that mean for us? Well, it means we can only see census records up until the 1940 census. Yep, that's the most recent one we can take a look at is 1940, which still isn't bad, but, you know, that's just the way it is. That's the only ones we can see. But what that also means is that the 1950 census is going to be released in the year 2022. Yeah, that's just a year after I'm recording this. And it will probably be in April of 2022 because April is usually considered the census month. So that's something we have to look forward to. Now, one of the great things I love about the census is that if your ancestors lived here any time before April of 1940, there's a very good chance that they're going to be in the census records, at least some of them, if not most of them. So if you're new at doing genealogy research, then you're going to be able to get some quick wins taking a look at the census records. Now we're going to discuss a little bit more how to go about researching in those census records in some subsequent videos. So stay tuned for those. But man, such a great resource. Now, not only is it likely that you're going to find some or a lot of your relatives in the census records, there is a ton of information you're going to learn about them in those census records. I mean, bunches. But what kind of information is there? Well, let's take a look. So what kind of information can you find about your ancestors in the census record? Well, this is just some of the things you can find out about your ancestors from the census. First of all, of course, their names, their immigration year, if they were an immigrant, where they were born, sometimes even where their parents were born. What was their occupation? How old are they? What are the relationships of the other people in the household to the head of that household? Have they had military service? And are they disabled? Now, see that guy in the middle there? He's just in awe. That's how I looked when I first discovered all that information I could find from the census. Now, here's the but. But you're not going to be able to find all that information in every census. Once again, the further back you go, the fewer information you're going to get. The newer the census, the more information and detail you're going to find generally. So just keep that in mind. You're not going to be able to find out all this information, say, from the 1800 census. No. But we're going to talk about that too. I put all the different census years into 3 broad categories. Now, I'll tell you what that's based on. First of all, the first category is the census records from 1790 to 1840. Now, what's unique about those? Well, what's unique about those is the only person they list on the census record is the head of the household. Yeah, just the name of the head of the household. All the other people in the household, you don't know who they are. You don't know what their names are. But what they'll do generally is that they'll give you the name of the head of the household. Then they'll have all these columns that have age groups and sexes. And it might say like, okay, how many males under the age of 6 in the house? How many males from 7 to 12? How many males from 13 to 16? And so on and so forth, and all different ages. And then they'll do the same thing with the females. Let me show you an example from the 1790 census. Now, here you just see a very small snippet from the 1790 census. Now, you'll see that each household gets one line in the census enumerator's records here. So you have each of those people there are the head of a separate household. And those categories I told you about with the ages and sexes, that really wasn't there as far as 1790 goes. Each census between 1790 and 1840 will have a different set of age ranges for each census. In 1790, it was really small. In other words, the age ranges they asked for were just 2. For males under 16 years old and males 16 years and older. So only 2 broad categories there. And for females, they didn't even want to know the ages. They just wanted to know how many females there were in the household. So not particularly helpful, but once again, as each year goes by, there's a little more information and detail. The second category is census records between 1850 and 1870. They did something great then. What they started doing in 1850, thank you census enumerators, was that they listed the names of every person in that household. Isn't that great? Now we can see who all was in the household. Now, even though that's great, The only bad thing about that is they did not show what the relationship of those people was to the head of the household. Now, you can assume a lot of things when you look at that, even though it doesn't have the relationships. And we'll talk about that in a later video. But if you look at this example from the 1850 census, you can see it shows the name of the head of the household and then the names of the other people in the household and how old they are and so on. But now it looks like it could probably be a typical family with the husband, the wife, and the kids. But in these censuses I mentioned, 1850 to 1870, you still don't know who these people are, these other people in the household. Now, you can probably assume that the person listed after the husband is the wife. And you can probably assume that the kids under there are the children, but you don't know that for sure. That other female in there could be a sister or cousin, the adult female. And the kids there, are they his children? And if that is his wife, that's the other, the adult woman there, were those kids all from that woman? And those children, are they all his children? Or, it's possible it's what's happened at that time too, is that if a man's sibling died, usually the husband, or if the sibling and his wife, the man and the woman of the family, both died, then a brother might take his children in to raise them. So, it's not going to happen in every household that you see in these cases, but there's always that possibility. You just don't know. And finally, the third category is 1880 and above, and this is where we hit the jackpot. Yes, this is where they not only put the names of every person in the household, but they also tell you, thank you, Mr. Census Enumerator, they also tell you what the relationship is between that person and the head of the household. So if you have a person there that is just a boarder and is not even really related by blood to that person, then it'll tell you they're just a boarder. If it's a brother-in-law, sister-in-law, they'll tell you that. And if there's an adopted child, they'll usually tell you that, but it's not always clear if they do. This is so fantastic that we have this record from 1880 on. Now, remember, don't have the 1890 census, but from 1880 on up, we have the names and relationships of those other people in the household. That's a lot of the basic information that you need to know before we dive into the census records. The only thing I'll tell you is you have to be careful with really any records you find when you're doing your family history. With the census records, you can't always take what you see in the census as gospel. Now, in most cases, it's probably going to be accurate, but there could be any number of things that could affect what they've put down or told the census enumerator. So it could be someone who, if they came from a foreign country, or if even their family just didn't care too much about exact ages, they may not know their exact age. They might be guessing at their age. So it could be off by 1, 2, 5 years, 10 years, or they could intentionally misrepresent their age for whatever reason. For vanity, who knows? And if a particular family was not home at the time, the enumerator might go to a neighbor and say, hey, what about your neighbors over there? What can you tell me about them? What are their names and ages? And where were they born? And so on and so forth. And how much information will that neighbor know about their people next door? Who knows? They could know a lot about them. They could know next to nothing about them. They could be guessing at ages. They could be just guessing at birthplaces. They might say that the guy next door was born in Germany when he was actually born in New York City. So once again, you just have to be very careful with these records and verify them with other records you'll find. But once again, I still feel the census records are one of the best, if not the best record you can use, especially when you're beginning. You can go later and verify that information, and you should verify that information with other records, but you have to start somewhere. So let's start with those census records. So join me next time when we'll get an overview of what the census records look like, not just those little snippets I showed you. And we'll find out where can we find these census records. It's a lot easier than you might think. So join me then for more adventures in the U.S. Census records on the road to your family history.